Here's another one for you, Mad Marv. You know, one of those crazy tales that old-timer jump captains like to tell young crewers. Perhaps one that's made up, and perhaps it's some sort of cautionary tale with a grain of truth. The provenance is impossible to prove, but I did find records from the Draconis Combine that list both jump ships as missing, presumed lost to misjump or jump drive failure. What makes it interesting enough not to dismiss outright is the tale both widespread and through the dark spacer community, and that it rarely deviates. It's almost always the same, and it appears to have been built upon an even older tale of the same sort. So either it's complete fantasy, and because it includes references to mysterious aliens, most think that it is. But the consistency of the two stories and how they seem to pair up leaves some room for doubt. Enough so that Comstar showed some interest, includes them in high-level training briefs for their Explorer Corps officers. It's where I heard them first personally. Anyway, they go like this. During the year that the McAllister Rebellion was at its heights and troops were moving from the frontiers of the Combine towards the hotspot, a battalion of the 5th Galedian Regulars was included in this. The Combine records show that on 9 November 2510, the troops load onto Vulture-class dropships and attach themselves to the jump ship Radion. The dropships take off, or the dock with the Radion, a Leviathan-class jump ship, with orders to transport them to Brailsford. This same report shows that neither the Radion or its dropships arrived in system. The tales say that the jump failed in wrecking the Radion and damaging all the dropships, stranding them in an unknown star system. Two locations, a planet and a large moon, are discovered as habitable for humans. With the Radion dying in a drift, the dropships are released. One is trapped by a deformed hardpoint, ruptures its hull when trying to break free. 4 dropships are clustered together, others fan out. One ship brushes another while maneuvering, sending both out of control towards the planet. The rest of the tale is atypical of planetary crashes, survival, and no chances of rescue or relief, which is where the second tale comes in. The parodies between them are convenient. On 7 November 3056, the scout ship, drum ship Tandaline, waiting at a jump point in the Salford system. The holdup was so that a Leopard-class dropship carrying a desk team under a Sosha Takata and Garbervos mercenary unit bound for a classified destination couldn't arrive and dock. Like the Radian did 546 years before, the Tandaline misjumps. Its lifeboats and dropships are then forced to descend on a planet in a process, passing by a derelict of another ship in orbit, possibly the Radion. During the first night on the alien planet, the remaining survivors formed 3 distinct groups: 12 desk soldiers, 11 mercenaries, and a 4 crew from the spaceships. Mercenary leader Vos confronts Takata that with the crash landing, their mission and contract are null and void under the radically changed circumstances. There is a dispute, but all agree they have no chance to leave again. Over the following days, edible plants are identified, solving the food problem. Vos seeks to assume overall command. To this end, he wants to salvage the battle mix from a crash-landed Leopard. Mistrust and tension builds up amongst the survivors. A desk patrol encounters a large bird-like alien who speaks to them, introducing himself as Dakota of the Tatati. The Dakota tells the survivors that other humans had arrived on this world centuries earlier. He recognized the Draconis Combine Dragon symbol. While the Koreans befriend the alien, a nearby mercenary patrol shoots another Tatati specimen and wounds Takata. He's brought back to the camp. His injuries are treated while the mercenaries apparently eat the one they shot. Later, Takata recounts the history of his species and how they separated into primitive plains dwellers and slightly less primitive forest dwellers like himself, and how the first humans came 500 years ago. The humans fought both amongst themselves and against the peaceful Tate and took to enslaving the Tate. 3 human settlements remain on the planet, but their technology level is low and they have no aircraft. Vos and his mercenaries are excited to hear this and secretly decide that they can rule the planet by hiring out the superior firepower of their mechs. The mercenaries agree to have their land pilots scout the human settlements. For the time being, the estranged survivors cooperate to free the land from the hulk of the broken dropship. Pilot is then ordered by Dakota to make a high pass, avoiding contact as much as possible, while Vos secretly orders him to fly over the settlements as low as possible to inspire awe. To find both the pilot lands the lamb in the plaza of one of the settlements and makes contact. He is excited to see an abundance of gold used in the buildings and is treated with the utmost respect by the residents. Tensions about how to proceed flare up again. Based on the pilot's incomplete report, Takada decides to send patrols to 3 entrenched cities, which are obviously fighting each other, to further scout them out. In the meantime, the remaining battle mechs are to be recovered. Bose irritates everybody by insisting that his Panther be retrieved first, although it is the mech that is most difficult to reach. Because of this, the patrols return before any of the mechs are free and report their findings. Besides Uzamgo, the merchant oligarchy where the wealth defines status, there are the cities of Oso, run by a centralized dictatorship, and Amakaza, a religious fundamentalist, run by religious fundamentalists with pure Shinto Buddhism philosophy. Bose then calls for an election and attempt to have himself elected as overall leader, but one of the death soldiers subtly threatens him not to press the matter for the time being. The mercenary faction decides on secretly finishing the retrieval of their mechs and use them to attack the Death's command post. One mech warrior and her tech have second thoughts about the planned murder, however, decides to warn Takada and his men. Later that night, 2 Death teams attempt to capture the mercenaries with tranquilizer guns. Firefight ensues between the Death troopers and the mercenaries who were caught red-handed while trying to power up their mechs. The Phoenix Hawk Lamb, the Panther, and a Javelin escape, while Holly Goodall and her Locust manages to kill the other Locust pilot with a cockpit hit. On the following day, the remaining 9 Death members, including Goodall, Johnson, dropship pilot Parker Daboud, and jumpship engineer Mark Jacobs, take the 2 remaining Locusts out of the dropship wreck. At this point, they are swarmed by a cheering, excited Tete because of the bird-like look and movement patterns of the Locusts. While the other battle mechs have a largely humanoid shape and were thus associated with the human newcomers by the Tatari, the Locusts are vaguely resemble the Tete body and are regarded as divine beings who will work to bring back balance that the humans have upset. Takada and his men, being riders and masters of the Locusts, immediately gain a godlike status with the primitive aliens, much to Takada's dislike. Discussing the damaged Locusts, they discover that Mark Jacobs is actually a dispossessed mech warrior. While the Death Troopers are also qualified as mech pilots, they are more useful outside the damaged machine, while Jacobs has no particular role or function. He is therefore allowed to pilot the surplus mech. They came under attack from the mercenaries while evacuating the dropship, but escaped to hidden cage with the guidance from the Tete. Takada has patrols infiltrate the city enclaves with help from the resident Tete servants. In Ursomago, a female Death Trooper is taken captive as the inhabitants cannot accept a woman being in command. The Ursomago are also reported to be about to hire the mercenaries. The next mercenary attacks against Takada's faction is repulsed by luring attackers into various types of pit and other traps built by the resourceful Tete workforce under directions from the Death experts. While a Death team infiltrates the prison and frees the captives, stealing a steam-driven Asongo tank in the process. Combined, these events considerably lower the mercenaries' reputation amongst their potential employers. In response, they lead a Sumgo attack force against Takada's men and the Tete, only to be repulsed again. Excuse me. Both Lamb pilot Brian Seagroves and Javelin pilot Kendall Peace began making their own deals with the residents from all 3 cities behind Bose's back. However, the cities in turn approached Takada's camp as well. The secret coven leaders from all 3 cities decide to play all factions against each other, with hopes that the newcomer factions will eliminate each other. Once the mercenaries begin to realize their precarious position, they decide on a demonstration of their power and begin to destroy some of the defenses as Osio and Ambasakaza. Takada attempts to exploit the situation by attacking the mercenary mechs, but this time his forces are driven off. However, in the aftermath of his failed attacks, human Tete recruits flock to Takada's banner against his wishes, as they regard his party as an alternative to the unsatisfying life in their cities. A combined effort from the cities, supported by the mercenaries, eventually threatens to overrun Takada's position and inflicts several casualties amongst his followers. Inspired by a Tete legend about another human settlement in the mountains, they eventually began to move off in that direction, pursued by the mercenaries who managed to destroy one of the Locusts. Bose was also qualified as a Lamb pilot, switches mechs with Seagroves for a recon run, but does not realize the Lamb is almost out of fuel, as Seagroves disabled the warning light during a previous mission. The resulting crash destroys the Lamb, presumably kills Bose, and effectively ends the pursuit of the Takada's group. Seagroves and Peace return to the warring cities to work as mercenaries. High up in the mountains, Takada and his followers eventually arrived at the resting place of the dropship Hideyoshi Tanato. They reviewed the last log entry, which describes how the survivors mothballed the ship and committed seppuku, as the crew had been unable to contact any other humans, and with no women had survived the planetfall. Over time, Takada and the refugees who came with him managed to bring the dropship back to flying condition by scavenging parts from the remaining locusts, produce fuel, and eventually lift off towards the second habitable world in the unknown system, the moon they have come to call Far Country. While they take off, circles of fire can be seen around the human settlements, and a panther and javelin are stalking each other. So, as I said, it's hard to determine whether or not these stories are true, and begs the question is, how did the information return to the inner sphere? Although we can imply that perhaps Comstar's Explorer Corps, somebody's managed to retrieve some kind of buoy or transmission. Perhaps it's just a cautionary tale. Some narrator's notes. Although I have read this novel several times, it still sits among my collection. For simplicity's sake, I have borrowed heavily from the novel's entry on Sarnanet and extended an invitation to one and all to visit that site for yourselves. Far Country is the only BattleTech book written by Peter Rice and is notable for its unorthodox storyline, which has only tenuous connections to the established universe. It is also the only canonical source where sentient aliens play a significant role, something that many fans feel should have no place in the fictional BattleTech universe. As a consequence, its canonicity is often questioned. Going on, my friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your co